Oh my fucking lord.
So, yeah, so this...
Oh my fucking lord. Not the ace highs, come on. I could jam this fucking hand. Let's be honest, like, it might not be the highest EV play, but I could jam it very profitably, you know?
So, flatting this hand will make about 42 big blinds. Jamming this hand is worse than calling. That's why we don't jam. So, flatting's worth 42, so you should flat. Jamming's worth 39, and folding's worth 0.
What's up, guys? My name is Lex Velters, and welcome to the 5th video in this little mini training series that I did with BBZ during WCoop. Today, we're going to be talking about a small blind. Now, small blind is obviously a very tough position because the whole table has position on us post-flop. However, we should not shy away from playing hands from the small blind. It's very important to play enough hands from the small blind. There's only one more person left to act behind you, and you already have a small blind invested. Now, without further ado, it's time to enjoy the video. Get your pencils out, make sure you make some notes for your session next time, and I hope you learn something.
All right, so for today, what I've got is back to basics. So we did some post flop stuff. So we're gonna do like another warm up. We're gonna just take a look at some small blind flats that you should make. So you do have a win rate. So we want to make sure that we're exercising the fact that we have a skill edge over the metagame by playing the hands that are profitable plays. Right. So how do you think about this at the moment?
Yeah, I think this is a pure flat. Generally, what I want to consider in the small blind is that I want to, with the low card variations of my flats, I am a little bit more hesitant when it's the button because I feel that the position from which people open gives me protection from the squeeze from the big blind. So like if EP or MP opens and I flat the small blind, I'm less likely to get squeezed from the big blind as opposed to this scenario. So I would try to go more towards flatting with the high cards in it like a king, so that I get squeezed less often from the big blind.
So that's true in one sense. So like the variable that you isolated is correct, right? Which is that it's more difficult for the big blind to squeeze if we flat against an earlier position open. That on the one hand is true. On the other hand, you have tension, right? And that's because at the same time that's true, you also have a weaker range from the button, which allows you kind of to play more hands, right? Like your overall VPIP will be higher against the button than it will be against the cutoff. Mm-hmm. Your overall VPIP will be higher against the hijack than it will against the button than it will against the hijack or the low jack or under the gun. Again, your ability to flat is less protected. So what you said is true, but your VPIP is going to be higher, and that's going to drag the call. That's going to keep the call at least at a competitive frequency with those other positions.
I think that I'm definitely overfolding because I'm just expecting the squeeze to be there, and I think I'm also not defending the right hands versus the squeeze, and maybe not even backjamming the right hands versus squeeze. So I think I think a good example is 20 big blinds deep, and you have a hand like 6-5 suited, right, and the button min raises. I could be mistaken, but I believe to remember that hand is like almost like a pure flat from the small. And I've just been primarily folding it just because I've kind of been doing what I advise people during these sessions not to, like if you make a mistake early in the chain, you're making the biggest mistake, whereas further down the chain you learn. And I think that small blind flatting is definitely something that I'm doing well versus early position, and versus later positions I've just sort of like stayed away from it with the bottom of my range.
Yeah, I would agree with you that that's not what we want to do. At 20 big blind, 6-5 suited is a mix. So I didn't want to cut you off. Yeah. 20 big blind, 6-5 suited is a mix. But this range, it sounds like is because it sounds like this you were unsure about this spot. And the weakest hand that you should be flatting here is like King 4 suited. Mm-hmm. So we had to flat not only King 7 but also King 6, and then also King 5, and then King 4. And King 7 is worth quite a lot of money. This hand's not like I'm isolating hands around the bottom of the range, but this hand's not worth like close to 0 in a model against the model situation. And that's also against larger sizes. One of the things that I need you to try to make sure that you're paying close attention to is whether or not your opponent's min raise, right? If your opponent's min raise, like you kind of need to hesitate before you click any buttons, and you kind of need to be like, okay, I might have to play wider here than I'm used to, because a lot of the models you look at, particularly if you're using a tool like GTO Wizard, which a lot of people are using today, those models, particularly deeper than 35, so once you get to 40 big blinds plus, those models use a 2.3x for every open, right? So what that means is if you encounter a min raise, you're getting better odds than the model was. And that means that the hands that you're used to playing, that's not enough. You have to play more. So you have your habits, and they're ingrained, and right. And so like if someone's using a smaller size than what your model suggests, you do have to kind of slow things down a little bit, think it through, and make sure that you don't fold fold too much, right?
Yeah.
And so GTO is using a 2.2x here, just so people can see what the range actually looks like. It's using a 2.2x. So again, it's the same example where Lex is up against the min raise, so he needed to kind of hesitate and play a wider range. Here's King 4 suited. It's worth 0 against a 2.2x, so I would advise playing this hand at a pure weight. Queen 6 suited, same thing. This model is suggesting this hand is worth 0 against a 2.2x. So against a min raise, I would advise playing it at a full weight. At least you could make those adjustments. Those are very easy adjustments to make. But King 7 suited is quite a profitable hand, and we definitely didn't want to be folding that hand. Suited 8s are very, very resilient. You'll see suited 8s in a number of different positions being pure plays. So you want to really hesitate to fold the suited 8s as well. So just keep that in mind. So you can see that this is probably, this is clearly a systematic thing that you do. Is you don't intuitively recognize that King 7 suited is a play.
Yeah, it's not a misclick like we can already,
Yeah. Yeah, so this is a different situation, so we're happy to skip that one. I can't filter that out very easily. So.
Whoa.
So how do you think about this?
I mean, this is easily a 3-bet even, I think.
Yeah, so we're just going to play the offsuit 10s at a pure weight. So all of them, right? So King 10, Queen 10, Jack 10. At this stack depth, we're going to play them all. And this sizing choice, while not a min raise, it is materially smaller than a 2.3x.
Mm-hmm.
So this is another example of the model. We've changed the stack depth to 80 big blinds. Button is open to 2.3x. Again, the opponent used a 2.1, so we have to be wider than this model would suggest. There's the offsuit 10s, and even the offsuit 9s are mixes.
Whoa.
You can make a very clean argument for playing these offsuit 9s against a 2.1x.
Wow, that's crazy. That's crazy, yeah. Okay. Oh my goodness.
And these are all, by the way, this is all filtered by early blind level. So I think that a natural question for someone to ask is like, oh, well, what about ICM? And it's like, well, there's not much because the blind level is 6120.
Oh, you filtered it for that too. That's smart. It's funny because like I know this is filtered for mistakes. So that's why every time a hand comes up, I'm like, oh God, because I already know what's going to happen. And I see Queen 10, King 10. I'm like, no, I'm better than this. Come on.
Yeah.
But apparently not, because this is very systematic,
Yeah, you're doing it a lot, right? You're doing it, like I said, close to 60% of the time still. So your base rate, like your highest frequency action, is actually folding. It's not playing. So it's not like these are mistakes that come up every once in a while and I'm trying to just like highlight something that you don't do much. Like you are folding these hands most of the time. So yeah, we got to stop doing that shit. Yeah. So we're just going to start playing. So here at 40, I mean, it's not going to change much, but this is like, it's just pre-flop. So this is like it's pretty easy for people to understand charts. So I think sharing some of this is fine. So Queen 10 offsuit here, you can see all these offsuit 10s, still very pure plays, still the suited 8s, very resilient. So the offsuit 10s and the suited 8s for people, those are going to be pretty resilient hands in this scenario. So, if anytime Lex folds a suited 8 or an offsuit 10, unless we're really shallow, it's likely to be a mistake. Okay, so here we're up against a min raise, so alarm bells should be going off. That we're not going to fold as much, that we're going to need to play a wider range. This hand is a mix against a 2.3x. This hand is going to be a pure play against a min raise.
Oh my fucking lord.
So this.
Oh my fucking lord.
So this hand's worth a lot of money.
God. All right, I'm gonna go back to bed. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. Not the ace highs. Come on. I could jam this fucking hand.
Yeah, pretty close. I mean, close.
Let's be honest. Like, it might not be the highest EV play, but I could jam it very profitably. Let's say that jamming is better than folding.
100%. Yeah. So people that are watching, that's absolutely true. So flatting this hand will make about 42 big blinds. Flatting, so calling here, which is a lot more than 0, right? Jamming this hand is worse than calling. That's why we don't jam. We don't jam this hand at all. But jamming this hand is worth about 39 big blinds. So flatting's worth 42, so you should flat. Jamming's worth 39 and folding's worth 0. So jamming this hand is much better than folding. So this is, not the line we want to take. So how do you think about this? A lot of people that study a lot, they also screw this up. So how do you think about this?
I think that I should use at around 30-35 big blinds. I think that a lot of the ace 8 through ace 5 region becomes like a 3-bet non-all-in as a bluff.
Cool. Okay. And then how do you feel about ace 7 in general? You're like, I don't have a feeling for ace 7 because it's a hand, but I mean,
it's one of the worst ace highs I can possibly have, I guess.
Okay, that's what most people think. This hand is a pure play. Like this hand is at least a mix. This hand is worth at least 0 across pretty much every single stack depth. So most people like massively, like even so, like for example, if I coach someone who's been working with me for a while and they have this small blind flat closer to optimal, they oftentimes still struggle with this A7. This is like one of the last hands to get fixed. Because like we can, and this is just a quick example. So this is 100 big blinds. You can see that it's still worth 0. It's mixing to call, and between call and fold, which means both answers are worth the same amount of money to us. I understand that graphically it looks like it mostly folds. That doesn't really matter. It's worth 0, and that's versus a 2.3x. So if they size smaller, it's arguably going to be a profitable play. So that's A7 at 100. We can just jump down to like 50. There's A7 pretty much pure. Jump down to like 30. There's A7 pure. Jump down to 20. There's A7 pure. So I basically just tell people don't fold A7.
Yeah, and I think what's important for people to know is that the most important example there is the 100 big blinds, because if it's competitive to play 100 big blinds deep out of position, it just means that the hand is very strong. You know what I mean? Because like out of position, 100 big blinds deep is a nightmare.
Yeah, these hands improve shorter. So like when we're deeper, we want those suited hands, right? We want those hands that can draw effectively. So yeah, this hand's not a great type of hand at deeper stacks. You see that in, for example, cutoff opening ranges as well, where offsuit ace-x hands are much easier to open, like less than 30 big blinds on the cutoff, and they get challenged as you get deeper. And the suited hands are much easier opens on the cutoff as we get deeper, but they get challenged as we get shorter. So it's the same kind of phenomenon where like the offsuit ace-x hands, these are just easier hands to play when we're short. Which is another heuristic or thing you should understand, is that when you see these offsuit ace-x hands, you want to slow things down a little bit if you're shallow. And if you're deeper, you can just be like, all right, fold. It doesn't matter as much. Now again, A7 offsuit here I would advise just playing pretty much all the time, but especially versus smaller sizes.
Yeah.
So how do you think about this?
I think this one mixes, but it's a 2.5x. That's important. So it's a little bit bigger. Important. So I would still mix this one. I think I would still be competitive to mix it.
Okay, cool. So this is an example of a model. So here's Queen 7. If your opponent was 2.3xing it would be a pure play.
Oh wow.
If your opponent's 2.5xing it, so like, should we pull some stuff out? Yeah, we definitely should. Should we pull out Queen 7 though? Probably not. Yeah. Probably not. So yeah. And I have models that 2.5x. Like if I really wanted to look it up, I can find the answer to that question. I have 2.5x models in pile, but I'm not going to pull them because it's like not that big of a deal. So how do you think about this?
Yeah, this would be a nice little 3-bet bluff.
Yeah, I'm going to play this one because we're short. So if we were deeper, I'd fold this one, but we're not deeper. We're shorter, so I'm playing it, and that's that relationship. To understand.
Would you say that when we use the offsuit aces as a bluff, when we're at around 30 big blinds, would you say that you want to play them hierarchically based on the kicker, or do you, because like it does seem to be that way, or do you think that ace 4 still has more value than ace 6, for instance, because of the straight component?
I think that's a good question. You play them basically hierarchically, basically. But the reason that's interesting is because you don't play ace 6 much. So you picked a good hand example to make this more complicated. So you play them hierarchically, so you play them from like ace king. So for people that are watching, it's like ace king, then ace queen, then ace jack, then ace 10. That's what it means. Like you just play them from the top down.
Yeah.
And that's true, but it skips ace 6. So you do that all the way down to ace 7, and then you jump to ace 5. But then you don't bring in ace 4, ace 3, and ace deuce very often. You have to be really short to bring in ace 4 and ace 3 and ace deuce.
Okay.
Yeah. So ace 6 is just like one of the least competitive ones. Ace 6 and ace deuce. Those would be the last ones to come in typically. But other than that, it's hierarchical. Yeah. And it's hierarchical because ace 7 will stay in and ace 5 will come out. And ace 7 will get added back in really quickly, and ace 5 is very slow to be added back in. Okay. So it behaves pretty hierarchically.
Yeah. Because that's interesting, right? Because like in the suited aces, ace 5 is always just the god nuts, you know?
Yeah. It's not obviously the case that it's going to work that way either. So like it's a good question for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be close as we get a little bit shorter. How do you think about it?
Well, I think that big blind. I would be a little bit tighter here. I think I would fold this one because he does open 2.3. It is 40 big blinds, but I think that an important component here is that the big blind is only 17 big blinds deep. So I think we're actually going to get shoved on quite a bit. So I think that this hand becomes close to a mix, or the bottom of our range. So I think with that component we can fold this one.
Yeah, that's probably a good observation. It's a mix without the big blind being on 17 big blinds, and the big blind on this stack, that's probably a bit of an obstacle. So it's probably a fine fold.
Okay.
That's a different situation, although I'm not sure how that would work against that side.
Man, well, this is such an interesting solution. Is this new? I think it's new. Okay, so obviously we talked in the past about when sorry to cross topics, but I just wanted to ask because I see it so much now. Sorry to put you on the spot, but hey, you put me on the spot all hour.
I
now.
did. Oh, yeah.
Okay, but so obviously you told me in the past, which has proven very effective, by the way, is I would primarily, when people limp, go to a strategy that was either raise or fold, right? And you told me that limping behind a limp is very effective, right?
Right.
It does really well, and that's been going very well. So, but I also see so many people min raising limps now, and it's so interesting to me. It's almost like an instant range definition or something for 2 big blinds, and you still, I don't know. It seems so genius. This is like do you have any idea like where is this coming from, or like is this just like somebody's doing it and maybe other people are just clicking the same button because they're like, oh, that's cool?
Yeah, so I haven't tested it, so I don't know that it's good or bad. I would assume that it's not good, but like from a theoretical perspective, but from a so I would assume that if I tested it, a model would dislike it. I would make that assumption. But it's very reasonable, like it's reasonably likely that it's good in the metagame. So it's reasonably likely that like how do I say this? Okay, sure. So I can say this. So like I ran some tests. This is old though, but I ran some tests like how long ago was this? This was like 7 years ago, maybe. So this is before solvers. Maybe it was 8 years, or maybe it was a little older than that even. And essentially, what I did was I looked at myself and like 2 or 3 of my friends because I was surprised by the findings. So I asked them if they could confirm them for me, and they all had the same thing. And it was if we isolate a recreational player, so a player that we know is really weak, if we isolate their limp, how far down could we go and make money? To a small size, like 2.3x, 2.5x, something like that. Again, this predates solvers. And the output, like the in the database, we found that we were able to make money with any isolation. Even when we made misclicks, we were able to make money. So there are some groups of players that are very exploitive in terms of how they play, and they might have figured out something similar. And they might just be doing this because they think that they can do it with any 2 cards almost. Like they can do whatever they want when someone limps. And the reason that can work is because if this guy's range is purely capped, if he can't have any strong hands at all, if he raises his strong hands and limps his bad ones, then he always has a bad one. So I mean, like unless these guys are going to do something about that, this player has 2 options. He can fold, which will make you a lot of money. Or he can call, and then he's probably going to use a really high frequency check on the flop, which means your equity realization will be very good. And he'll probably have a really high fold to C bet on the flop, which means you'll have a really economic bet post flop. So that's old data. So I'm not comfortable saying that that's the case today, but I'm pretty comfortable saying that like a while ago against recreational players, you could isolate them in a situation like this to a size like this, and you can make money with pretty much any 2 cards. And the play of this player when they limp is and if they're weaker, it probably hasn't changed much. It probably hasn't developed much if they're still doing this action. So that might be where it's coming from. It might be more of an exploitative thing. But I have not tested this exact size in like HRC, for example, which would be the tool that we would use to test something like this. I would assume that if I give it this size and limp and a bigger size, it doesn't choose this size. That this size would be outcompeted by bigger ISOs.
Do you think that it's a sort of a counter to the strategy, the limp or 3.5x strategy that a lot of people are adopting to?
Probably not, but it's because the limp is still not like it's not that weak.
No, especially when people that are really good are using that strategy.
That's what I mean. Yeah. So like, I still don't think that would be that effective against that.
Okay.
Yeah. Usually, like not all the time, but usually, if your opponent can't fold any hand at all to your bet's not very good. Like that's usually like a reasonably good heuristic. If your bet size doesn't make a single hand in your opponent's range indifferent, your bet size probably sucks. And again, it's not always true, but it's often true. If you're so like just as a rule of thumb, it's probably the case. And the reason for that is simple. It's because you should be attacking your opponent with a range that's stronger than theirs. And if they're going to play their whole range against you, you probably make more money making it bigger.
Yeah.
So Yeah, so here I don't think, like, let's say this was Dom or something like that, and let's say he limps here or 3.5x's, right? I don't think that he would have a folding range against this size.
Yeah.
I don't think he's limping weak enough range to have a folding range against this size, which means that if you have kings here, you just make more money by making it bigger. So it's really hard for this to be the right answer.
You kind of turn the tables on yourself by doing it.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I mean, like you can think through poker problems. Like that's how we used to have to think through poker problems without a solver. You kind of like iteratively self-play the strategy, and you're just like, yeah, this probably sucks because like, if I had a good hand, I could just make more money because he would just have to call a lot still, but make it a little bit bigger. So yeah, that's how I think about it.
Cool. Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah, but I'll test it. I mean,
yeah. I know you will. Yeah.
All right, so we got a7. We don't fold this at any stack depth, and your opponent's min raising, so it's just like not a hand that I want to fold. I mean, the big blind's short, but I actually like the blocker-oriented hands when the big blind's short because if you think about what he's going to jam, it's going to be ace high. So if you think about which hands deteriorate, it's more likely to be the hands that are like, I don't know, Jack 8 suited or 10-7 suited or something like that. It's more likely to be some hand like that than it is to be the hand that actually reduces the probability that he jams, which would be a hand like a7. Because this guy's going to jam ace deuce. So having an ace in your hand is a big deal. So, so I'm pure playing here still.
At what stack depth would you, let's say you flat the a7, at what stack depth would you fold to a big blind shove? Imagine if you flat this and they jam, you call with a7.
I do call, yeah.
But at what's the cutoff? I'm so bad with calling. Is there there is in GTO Wizard, right? Just a trainer where you just like, where you can just like make non-stop decisions for pre-flop all-ins for like 10 to 15 bigs.
Yeah, you can definitely train all of the pre-flop stuff.
Yeah, I should do that. Yeah. It's like you guys from Sit and Goes are so good at that,
No, we've drilled it a lot.
Yeah,
basically. Yeah. But yeah, even up to like 20 big blinds, I think you're going to be calling it off here.
Okay.
So like your button opens, you spot the small blind. Big blind jams less than 20. Anything less than 20, and you can still just flick it in with a7 off. As long as the button folds, right? Button folds and it comes back to you. Yeah, a7 off, so you can flick it in. So that's just like not the same. This is kind of what I mean by you could fold like 10 to 20% of these, and I actually want you to, because I don't want you to play against a 4.5x queen 5. Like that's a bad idea. Okay, so this is a different situation again with the limp in the ISO.
Oh, holy shit! Now
we've got
this is disgusting. That's all you needed to hear.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you know, like we're good. All right. So we could probably this one. You're too short here, so this one's fine. I like the fold here with 15 bigs, so this is good. I would fold here also. It does get much more challenging to play hands that are weak hands as we get shorter, and we start to transition over to more of like a 3-better fold type strategy when we get really short as well. Although we still flat here. I mean, we definitely still have like a pretty legit flatting range here. But yeah, I think that I wouldn't flat this. Okay, so let's jump over to some post-flop spots because this is really important. It's really important work to do. But if for someone watching, we're just looking at Lex folding the small blind. We could do more engaging work. This is a multi-way flop, which is interesting. So how do you think about the flop, generally speaking, here?
I mean, it's very important in multi-way to see if I'm in position or if there's someone or one or two players with position on me. I think that on like dry boards like this, I just c-bet pure almost, especially with EP-MP ranges.
So you're c-betting 100% of your range, or you're c-betting this hand pure?
No, c-betting let's say a big part of my range.
Okay.
When I'm in position versus 2, and it's I have to say that I mainly look at unless it's like 6-5-4 or something. I'm mainly looking at the small blinds range to decide if I want to c-bet this board, yes or no. And I'm not entirely sure if that's correct.
Okay.
So I will, I think I'm checking the most on boards like Jack 9-8, Queen 10-8, that sort of thing. I mean, it gets a little more iffy when you go with Queen or King, of course, then I'm c-betting more. But everything in the middle is where I start checking a little bit more. But like this, like high, low, low, it's just, for me, it's just pure bet.
Okay. This is probably more like a 60% bet if I had to guess. If you said like, what do you think the c-bet frequency is if we solve this in like a tool like simple 3-way? My assumption would be that it's a 60% c-bet scenario. So you should c-bet most of your range, but not all of it. types of hands you're likely to check are like, relatively dense ace high, as most people would like, a lot of people would expect. It's not as good to see, but like, I don't know, ace queen here or something like that, or ace 10. So those aren't like great bets. It'll probably mix hands like sevens and things like that. And you'll end up betting something like 60% of your range, checking something like 40. This hand's probably a high frequency bet, probably not pure. I think betting this hand's reasonable, but yeah, it's an important question for me to ask when you check the flop. So you checked, which is not stupid. How do you think about this?
I mean, I think I need to start betting. I think especially since, okay, so I do feel that I am capped to a certain point if I check the flop. So for them to check to me on the turn, I feel like caps their range as well. So I really feel like I can start firing here.
Okay, so that's, I mean, you understood like a pretty important idea about how this works, which is that after we check back the flop, this is very difficult. So once we've checked back the flop, we no longer have the luxury of having an uncapped or a strong betting range. So that makes it much more challenging to bluff because it's harder to bet for value. And bluffs are dependent variables. They don't exist on their own. Bluffs try to represent a value bet. If you can't represent a value bet, then there's no bluff, right? Like if there's no value to offset with a bluff, then the bluffs don't bet. They don't exist. So yeah, so now we're very short value bets, essentially, is what's happening. So that sucks. It requires us to be very careful. You do have a hand like pocket nines. I told you could have a hand like pocket sevens, so you have a hand like pocket nines. Conceivably, you could have a hand like pocket tens, which is a reasonable hand to open up now. You might have like some jack X hands in the checking range, although I wouldn't necessarily advocate for that. But you could have like jack X no kicker, like jack 8 suited or something like that, or jack 9 suited, maybe. So this hand is very attractive to bet because of the king of diamonds. So not only do we have king queen, but we also have a diamond blocker. So we block the combo draws from check raising us. We also block the king high flush draws in general from the big blind from calling, which if we're betting, for the most part, we want people to fold. So I do think this is hard. I don't know the answer. I think that I'd probably mostly check, but I would occasionally bet. And I would probably bet on the larger side here because I would be convinced that whatever I'm betting is the best hand. I mean, like if I check back Jack X and they both check me twice, I'm pretty convinced that Jack 8 is like leagues above their calling range for the most part. If I have pocket nines, I win all the time. If I have Jack 9, I win all the time. So, go ahead.
Do you, when you say large, because in my head I was thinking about I would bet, even before you said that, I would bet like 6.5 big blinds. But when you say large, would you go to like 11?
No, I'd probably stick to that too. I'd probably be sticking to something like that as well. Okay. I don't think I'd overbet here.
That's also because you're capped, right? So.
Well, no, I mean I'm uncapped at the margin now. Like once I decide to bet, if you actually just evaluate the betting range, so I'm going to check here a lot, okay? But once we isolate what I'm betting, it's going to be pretty damn strong. I mean, there's probably there's going to be a lot of jack 9 and pocket nines as a fraction of my betting range because I just don't. I'm going to be disciplined about betting here, and I'm not going to have much else to bet with. So once I decide to bet, it's going to be really strong. That speaks to exactly why it's so difficult to bluff here. Because if the only value bets I have are jack 9 and pocket nines, I can't bet much, right? And I don't want to say that those are the only ones, but it's pretty close to that. That's pretty close to the reality that we're living in. Is like our range is like jack X no kicker, like jack 8 or jack 9, and pocket nines, and maybe pocket tens, and yeah, that's it. So yeah, once I bet, I'm not the bet. Like if I bet the turn and I get called and we go to the river, and someone assumes that when they play against me I'm capped, that's wrong because I won't be. I'll actually be really strong. But if you're playing against someone who doesn't know how this spot works, you can kind of assume that they're capped in the sense that like they check back the flop, they got checked to twice, and they're not very good at no limit, which means they're not very disciplined. And they just saw that someone checked twice and they're just stabbing because they're just like, oh, they'll probably fold. They check twice, which is fine. Like that works. Like that, like that. The thing about that is that it's effective. Like a lot, I guess if these two guys are also weak, they'll probably fold too much. So yeah, like that. But that's sort of how I think that this works. And you check the river here. The issue now is it's actually getting hard because of the way the board ran out. It's getting a little bit more challenging to have as much air, right? So All of your 8-7s filled out to pairs, 10-8s, queen 10s, they're all pairs. So the only high card hands you can have are like king 10 and king queen, which arguably could have bet flop or turn, and then ace highs, right? So this is the bottom of your range, and it has a diamond.
Yeah.
So, I think that a reasonable hand for you to have here, at a pretty high frequency, is ace king of diamonds. I think ace king's one of the first hands that you check back the flop with. You could make an argument that you would bet the turn with it, but you don't have much value supporting a betting range. So you could make a pretty clean argument for checking it twice.
Yeah.
And now you would have ace king of diamonds or ace queen of diamonds. And you don't have any worse hand at all than king 10. In my opinion. I think if you have 5-6, you pure bet the flop. I think if you have 6-7, you pure bet the flop. Once we get to anything else, it's going to have an 8 or a 9 in it.
That's a good point.
And so queen 10's a straight, queen jack's a pair. So the only hand that's worse than this one that you could even that you would even open is king 10. That's the only one. And king 10 is a worse hand than this, so should probably bet the flop more. Could have bet the turn, just like this. And not all king 10 will have a diamond. So even when you have king 10, it won't necessarily have a diamond. And then within that, we have the high card diamond. So high card diamond, on average, when you look at a bunch of different spots, high card diamonds are worth more than low card diamonds. Why? Because the small blind is more likely to play, more likely to have a king high flush here, for example, than a king high flush. So I wouldn't check here. I would have bet. And I don't think that I have a lot of value here, but I would have bet anyway.
So good, huh? You know what's nice about these coaching sessions as well? Is that we don't even talk about what stakes this is. Doesn't matter. I like that. It's like, it doesn't matter what stakes this is. You're supposed to play good. Yeah, and that doesn't mean that you guys should, I would myself play differently in a $30 bounty as opposed to a $5.30 bounty or whatever. But when you're studying, it doesn't matter. You just need to study as if every hand is never too late. Never too late to start learning,